The reunion hall glowed with warm lights, but beneath the surface of cheerful music and clinking glasses, there was a current of anticipation that wasn't kind. The group chat had been buzzing for weeks, though none of them would call it what it truly was. They told themselves it was a joke, a harmless decision made, for fun, but everyone knew the subtext. When Marcy suggested inviting Lena Hart, the chat exploded with emojis, laughing faces, mock applause, comments like, "Imagine how she turned out, probably worse than in high school." No one protested. Why would they? For 10 years they had carried the same smug assumption, that the girl they once mocked for her silence, her frayed backpack, her out-of-place thrift store sweaters, would stay small forever. Inside the decorated gym, the polished floor reflected golden fairy lights, but the beauty of the evening clashed with the pettiness of the whispers. Clusters of well-dressed former classmates gathered in a space that felt both familiar and foreign. People compared careers, houses, partners, vacations, carefully curated pieces of adulthood meant to impress. But behind every smile, behind every raised brow, there was one topic that kept resurfacing. "Is she actually coming?" Someone asked, pretending not to care. She replied to the invite, another answered. "Said she'd be here." "God, this is going to be hilarious," a man muttered, shaking his head with a mean grin. They didn't remember the details of who Lena truly was. 10 years had blurred a lot, but the label they gave her had remained crisp, the class loser. The girl who sat alone, who never spoke unless a teacher called on her, whose hair often looked like she'd brushed it in a rush, who wore clothes too big and shoes too worn. The girl who always seemed to be in the background, like an extra in a movie about better, louder lives. Back then, they never bothered to wonder why she was so quiet or why her clothes didn't fit. They just found it easier to assign her a role and laugh at it. Now, 10 years later, they waited to relive the comfort of that easy ridicule. As the DJ played upbeat music, the doors opened occasionally for arrivals, but none of them were Lena. The expectation grew into a kind of gleeful impatience. "She's totally bailed," someone guessed. "Probably too embarrassed. Or too broke to Uber," another snickered. The words floated around the room like small, sharp knives, tossed casually without thought for where they landed. The cruelty wasn't new, it had simply matured with age, hidden under cocktails and polite phrases. They had dressed it up, but it remained the same. The night carried on, conversations looping back to old memories. The popular crowd reminisced about senior year, about parties, about the winning homecoming game. They relived victories that no longer mattered and laughed at jokes that hadn't aged well. Every so often, someone's eyes flicked toward the entrance, expecting Lena to walk in looking exactly the same as they remembered, timid, uncomfortable, an easy target. But then it happened. A faint vibration shook the tall windows beside the gym stage. At first it blended into the hum of conversation, but the trembling grew until glasses on tables began to rattle. People paused mid-sentence. The music thumped obliviously in the background, but the strange rhythmic sound overpowered it, deep, powerful, mechanical. "What is that?" someone asked, brow furrowed. A couple of guests walked toward the exit. Curiosity spread like wildfire, and within seconds, groups of people spilled out onto the school lawn. The night air was crisp, carrying a low, thundering chop that made the ground seem to pulse. Then they saw it. Over the football field, where they once played games and posed for photos, a helicopter descended, its sleek silhouette cutting sharply against the moonlit sky. The swirling blades sent gusts of wind sweeping across the grass, tugging at skirts, blowing hair out of place. The noise was overwhelming, but even louder than the machine was the shock rippling through the crowd. "Is that for real?" someone muttered, shielding their eyes. "No way, no way." People stumbled backward, staring as the helicopter landed with precision. It was nothing like the patched-up emergency chopper they might have seen on TV. This one was polished, luxurious, the kind executives or celebrities would charter. The door opened with a smooth hydraulic hiss. Out stepped a woman who didn't belong to their memories. Her hair, once messy and unremarkable, cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a tailored charcoal jumpsuit that fit like it had been crafted solely for her. She walked with a straight, balanced confidence, heels clicking rhythmically against the portable landing mat, the kind of walk that didn't apologize for taking up space. At first, the crowd didn't speak. They just watched, stunned, breath tangled in their chests. It took several seconds before recognition hit. "It's her," someone whispered, incredulous. "Lena." "Yes," another breathed. "That's Lena Hart. The same Lena they once invited out of mockery. The same girl they expected to appear small, overshadowed, forgettable." But nothing about her was small now. Lena removed her sunglasses, and even that simple gesture felt cinematic. Her eyes were calm, steady, taking in the group with a faint, knowing smile, the kind that suggested she had anticipated this reaction. She walked forward slowly, unhurried, as if giving them time to adjust to the reality unraveling in front of them. When she reached them, she paused, her voice smooth but laced with something unshakable. "Sorry I'm late," she said lightly. "Traffic was terrible, in the sky." Some people let out awkward laughs, the kind that covered their shock rather than amusement. Others simply stared, words lost completely. In their silence, one truth crystallized. They had invited her to mock her. But instead of giving them the satisfaction of the past, she arrived as someone they could never have predicted, a woman who had soared far beyond every expectation, every insult, every limitation they tried to place on her. And for the first time that evening, not one of them felt superior. They felt small. The moment Lena stepped into the hall, the atmosphere shifted so sharply it felt physical, like someone had pulled a thread and unraveled every assumption in the room. People tried to act natural, plastering on smiles that didn't reach their eyes, adjusting their clothes, standing straighter as if posture alone could undo the shock of what they'd just seen outside. The music played on, but softer now, as if even the speakers sensed the need to quiet down. Lena walked slowly, not out of hesitation but control. Each step echoed lightly against the polished floor, a reminder that she was no longer the girl who used to shrink into corners. The room seemed to widen around her, people instinctively giving her space, unsure whether they should approach her or hide from their own memories. Marcy, once the queen bee, was the first to muster the courage, or desperation, to greet her. She smoothed her hair nervously as she stepped forward with a smile that was far too bright to be real. "Lena, wow," she blurted out, eyes darting from the jumpsuit to the designer handbag to the effortless confidence. "You look amazing." Lena smiled gently, not cruelly, just politely. "Thank you. You look well too." Marcy blinked. She wasn't expecting kindness. She had come armed with pretend friendliness, ready to mask her discomfort with compliments, but kindness threw her off balance. For a moment, Marcy didn't know what to do with her hands or her face or herself. Before she could recover, two former classmates joined them, all smiles and forced nonchalance. "So, Lena," one of them said, his voice cracking slightly. "What have you been up to? It's been so long." Lena considered him for a moment. In high school, he had snatched her sketchbook once and passed it around the lunch table, laughing at her drawings. He probably didn't remember. People like him rarely did. But she remembered. Still, her voice was even, warm but steady. "I run a tech company now." "Oh," he said, eyebrows lifting. "Like a startup." "We were a startup," she corrected softly. "Now we're a public company. We crossed $1 billion valuation last quarter." The silence that followed was thick and almost comical. Someone dropped a fork. Another person choked slightly on champagne. Marcy's jaw opened just a fraction before she caught herself. "$1 billion," she repeated, as if the word were foreign. Lena nodded casually. "Yes. It's been an intense few years." The questions came faster then, clumsy attempts to sound impressed without sounding shocked. "What kind of tech? How long have you been running it? Are you, like, the CEO?" "Yes," Lena answered calmly. "I founded the company." The whispers spread through the hall like wildfire. Heads turned. People stared openly, without shame now, because their filters were gone. Every person who had once mocked her, or ignored her entirely, was scrambling internally, trying to make sense of the gap between the girl they remembered and the woman standing before them. Some looked at her with awe. Some with envy. Some with guilt. All of them felt the weight of their assumptions cracking. But Lena didn't linger with the ones who suddenly wanted her attention. She didn't bask in their discomfort or demand apologies. She simply excused herself after a few minutes and made her way across the hall, her gaze searching for something, or someone. Near a refreshment table stood an older man with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled warmly when he smiled. Mr. Grant, her high school English teacher. He had once been the only adult who spoke to her with genuine interest, who noticed when she stayed late to finish projects, who asked her if she was doing okay on the days when she clearly wasn't. He looked at her now with a pride that needed no words, but he spoke anyway, his voice soft and warm. "You kept your promise." Lena laughed, an honest, bright sound. "I did. I told you I'd fly back one day." "You didn't specify the method," he teased, eyes sparkling. They hugged, and it felt like the past finally aligned with the present. For a brief moment, the hall was just noise in the background, and Lena felt grounded, seen not for her success but for who she had always been. When the hug ended, Mr. Grant looked at her more closely. You held your head up even back then. I knew you'd do something extraordinary. Some days I didn't believe that myself, Lena admitted. But you did. That mattered more than you knew. Around them, classmates lingered, pretending not to stare. Some approached tentatively, driven by guilt. Others approached boldly, driven by opportunity, hoping to network, to reconnect, to rewrite history as if they had always been kind to her. One woman, who'd once mocked Lena's clothes in front of the entire class, stepped forward with trembling sincerity. Lena, I'm really sorry. About everything. I was awful. I didn't understand anything back then. Lena studied her for a moment. The apology was raw, unpolished. Most others had said sorry with bright smiles, apologies coated with self-preservation, not remorse. But this one felt real. Thank you, Lena said quietly. I accept that. She didn't add more. She didn't need to. As the evening went on, more people approached, some with excuses, some with flattery, some with small confessions wrapped in nervous laughter. Lena met each conversation with grace. She didn't forget, but she didn't wound. She was beyond those past versions of herself and them. Near the end of the night, she stepped outside to breathe. The helicopter waited on the field, lights glowing softly in the darkness, rotors still. The cool night breeze swept past her, freeing the weight of conversations she had carried all evening. A few classmates followed, hovering awkwardly several feet behind her, hoping for a final moment, another chance to align themselves with the woman they once dismissed. Lena turned not out of obligation but peace. Thank you all for inviting me, she said gently. Tonight reminded me who I used to be, and how far I've flown. The words weren't sharp. They were simply true. As she climbed into the helicopter, the blades began to whirl, sending waves of wind across the field. Her former classmates raised their hands to shield themselves, watching as she lifted into the sky with effortless grace. And in the glow of the rising aircraft, they finally understood. They hadn't mocked her. They had motivated her. They had not expected her to rise. But she had risen higher than any of them could imagine. They hadn't invited the class loser. They had invited the girl who became unstoppable.